Okay, I ended the conference because it was messing up, and I turned on my voice.
Oh, cool.
So you can see. Hi, guys. I'm Kevin Farley. We're going to get started because there is a lot to cover. It really is. There's this. What I'm going to share with you is really 3 years worth of knowledge. So it's very serious stuff. It's the kind of stuff that at the end of a project, at the end of a 1 or 2 year project, you're going to wish that you did this. So I'm not trying to brag about anything. I'm just saying this is like 3 years of problems have been crystallized in this. So that's just to get your attention. So we'll quickly go through the deck, introductions. We'll talk about what is an engaging experience. The reason we're here really is the value of engaging experiences is exponential now because brands are trying to reach people on digital channels. And it's complicated to have an engaging experience. So we're going to talk about that. We'll talk about understanding how assets then plays a part in engaging experiences. And then we'll talk deeply about assets, how to understand our asset requirements, how to build asset management components, and then how we bring it all together in AEM. A brief word from our sponsors, Virtusa Polaris. We have 19,000 resources. I have 250 Adobe guys, 250 front-end guys. We do a lot of Adobe gigs around the world. We won Adobe Partner, Innovation Partner of the Year in 2015. This is just our media logos that we have. We actually built Chase. Anyone who uses the Chase mobile app or anyone who's on chase.com, we built that. If you've ever been on Cisco's website, we built that. A lot of these larger properties we built. So that's a word from our sponsors. So the real reason we're all here, and the reason why Gartner is thinking about their next digital platform, the reason why Scholastic is moving to their new digital platform, the reason why PwC's creative team is spending time trying to figure these things out is because we're building engaging experiences. And this revolution that happened, that there's these friendly devices that are easy to interact with has really changed the world. The world used to be revolved around XML and SOA. That was back in the day. That's when the back end mattered. And now it's all about the front end. And now HTML and CSS and JavaScript, the world runs on it. We used to run on XML. We used to run on C or Java. But now we run on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And why? So it's simple. We see these things all the time. We all have 50 apps on our phone. We're all on interactive sites. But to make this experience happen is very, very complicated. Everyone expects it. Everyone says, like, you have a sucky website if you don't have it. But to make that happen is so complicated. So responsive. It's got to be responsive. And we know Bootstrap is changing all the time. We know Angular is changing all the time. But then we think about assets. How do assets play a role here? Well, look at this. We got those are like tiny little pictures. Now we got this picture here. And look at the aspect ratios. There's different aspect ratios all over there. So how many people know about the adaptive image component? Because that's the first thing people will say, well, I use the adaptive image component. Well, you know what? The adaptive image component doesn't deal with aspect ratios very well. It's very difficult to industrialize an adaptive image component. So what we're talking about is the great digital experiences that are now table stakes. If you're not creating a great website, you suck. And if you get below a 3.5-star rating, nobody buys you, right? So this is our standard. So whether we like it or not, whether we know about it or not, the standard is you have to build a rich, interactive, responsive experience. And Adobe Marketing Cloud does that. AEM does that. But assets are a critical part of it because what is a great website? It's got great content. Because you might have a great design, but if you don't have great content, no one really wants to go back again. So great content is images, it's video, it's great copy, it's documents. So assets is about how do we create responsive, rich, but high performance content experiences in our digital channels. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about, and this is where my approach, as Carlos knows, because we went to the previous one a couple of years ago, I'm going to teach you like how you build things. Instead of, there's some amazing presentations at the Meetup. They get into like the coolest code I've ever seen, like slicing and dicing the JCR around 100,000 nodes and telling me what a different search thing is. I'm amazed at some of the people, and some of these are at who's our Valtech, for example. You know, so some of these like fantastic programmers. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is less about programming and more about problem solving at scale, and then using the platform to solve the problem at scale. So we're going to go, just for fun, we're going to look at a couple of websites. So I actually helped build Aetna.com. We're just going to look at Bloomberg.com just because it's a great experience. I helped to build Nielsen.com, and I helped to build Time Warner Cable's Channel U experience, but we all have our favorites. I'm using this as an example that your creative teams should be giving you this as what they want built. So I don't know how many people, does everyone get this? Does everyone's creative team give them this? So you need a desktop, you need a tablet, you need a mobile. We should do mobile first, right? So this is the asset that you're given, that you have to produce. Now the thing about AEM is this is just one. Well, we know that AEM is taking to the next level. We're not just building a website. We're building a factory that can build innumerable websites. So this is just a template with components on it, and they're just going to drag stuff onto the page. So this, for example, similar to Bloomberg.com, is a news card. They're going to drag a news card on the page, and they're going to drag an image onto the news card, and then they're going to put some copy into the news card. But the news card is going to change its shape depending on its requirements. So the higher order of magnitude problem that we're solving is when you would just build a website, then you built each page custom. Now we're building a framework that the authors, without any IT interference, are building hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of pages. And so it's a different problem that we have to industrialize. And so the phone is an interesting example. To create an iPhone was a work of genius, but it's not valuable unless you can create 600 million of them that people can afford. That's where we're living life now, is people are consuming this. So we're building websites that we need to help our companies create hundreds of thousands of pages and let them do it in an easy way. And so it's a difficult engineering problem. So let's just look at some websites as examples, so we can really have talking points. And if anybody has a favorite, I'd be happy to go to someone's favorite site. I'll just use Aetna as an example, though. So we'll look at Aetna. So this is one of their pages here, and notice what it does. So it's going to stretch, it's going to stretch, it's going to stretch, and then it's going to break. So it's got a break point. So that's pretty normal. We're used to breakpoints. But now look at this. Look what happens to that 4-column component. You know, so here the creative dudes said, hey, we're going to have 4 columns, and now we're going to break it into 1 column. Mm-hmm. Well, I got different image asset sizes and different aspect ratios. I got a problem to solve there. That looks easy. The creative team just gave a comp. But I have to produce components that are going to do this, and I have to deal with them. So I have to deal with these problems. So that's an Aetna.com example. We'll go back here. Bloomberg is a great site. It's a pretty fast site. It actually consumes a lot of CPU, so it actually blows up your CPU. But it is fantastic. Look at all the great components that it has, and how fast it is. So it's a great example of responsive design. This is a site that we built for Time Warner Cable, and I have this here, and this has lots of video on it, and it's nice and responsive.
Time Warner Cable, it's in overall everything?
Yeah, this is Time Warner Cable's employee portal, not their public site. This is their internal site. And then, so I just want to give us examples. And if we had any, and Rauxa, let's actually look at Rauxa's website. If I could get that out of the way. Do I have Rauxa? So here's Rauxa's website. So notice the use of squares. Squares have a nice aspect ratio. All right, so one way to solve the problem is like manage your aspect ratios. Now, lots of us actually get the design after creative's done. And creative got very creative. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about today. So we're in what we know is we have to make it work on all these devices. So page weight's an important consideration as well as a nice experience. So we'll go back to the presentation here. So this then drives our need to understand AEM assets. So this, I just pasted something from the website. So Adobe is getting better and better at documenting things. So I do recommend that you interact with the Adobe documentation. So there is so much to assets. There is the whole integration with Creative Cloud. That's a great value prop. What that means is, so when you're a large brand like Aetna or AstraZeneca, you literally might have 100 agencies that are working for you. And so if you can connect AEM assets to the Creative Cloud, then you can have all these external agencies develop their assets by a project basis and then submit those assets through workflow to get sent to you. So that's a great integration story. So findability. If you have assets, one of the critical problems with assets is finding them and managing them. And so if you're a large brand, you will have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of images, and you might want to reuse them, but you need to know how to get them. How do I want to publish an article? Well, who's the audience for the article? The article is going to be towards seniors. It's Medicare. It's a Medicare article. It's towards seniors. Is it about healthy lifestyle, or is it about care prevention, or is it about taking care of a loved one? So I need to find an image that has this kind of, is outdoors. It's a person in a wheelchair, but it's a person on a sunny day. So it needs to be a bright, be happy even though you're in a wheelchair. But so that's metadata, right? So search and metadata management is important. Workflow is important. So all of these things are important. I'm not going to talk about every one of these things, but all of these are fundamental to how AEM Assets helps brands manage their digital assets. So when we think in terms of what our problem space is for rich content, we know we need to deal with images, which are typically PNGs and JPEGs. They can be other things, but these are your typical image types. You'll actually find if you go to the product page, AEM Assets supports innumerable file formats, so it'll support pretty much any format that you need. It'll support innumerable video formats. These are typically some of the video formats that are out there now, but it also supports documents. So PDF documents, Word documents, PowerPoint documents, it actually has a lot of capabilities that maybe people don't know about those documents. So when we deal with these kinds of assets, then we have to deal in terms of how do we take our images and manage their aspect ratio across different viewports and different templates and component size. How do we manage our videos from a space point of view, but how do we even understand the difference between a mobile versus a desktop video? That's a key problem. And we also are trying to take into account HTML5 video player. So video has transformed itself in the last 3 years. You used to have to be able to downgrade on everything, right? But as soon as you say we don't support IE 8 or 9 or 10 anymore or whatever, everyone's supporting HTML5, your video problems pretty much just went away. But your video downgrade detection has totally changed. So now, now the old way of falling back on videos doesn't work anymore because the HTML5 video will play any video. So you have additional problems to solve. So documents, we can make them web-friendly by using the DAM. But in general, when we industrialize things, we do have storage requirements, findability problems, workflow problems, performance problems, because digital assets are large. Digital assets will be in the terabyte types of levels. So you really do have to understand the problem better in order to scale the problem better. And so AEM Assets allows us to find things with metadata and tagging. It manages renditions. It'll manage video renditions with video profiles. It has document renditions it'll support. And then it will allow us to delegate different roles in different, in the step of content production, review, and use in the platform, which means you can bring your whole creative team together, as I know PwC is looking at. And there are special caching features that ultimately, if you want your digital assets to reach the device in a timely manner, they have to cache. And so AEM provides all of those features. So we'll talk about those. So I'm not actually going to go into this. I've just built this slide that I'll share the slide deck with everyone, but there is a whole set of features in the DAM about adding images, sharing images, managing assets, finding assets, editing metadata. I don't want to get into that because in a sense that's the product basics, but at least I've kept that here. What I really want to talk about is understanding our asset requirements and then building components for assets. So before I get into asset requirements, this level of detail, I want to explain the problem about asset requirements. So when we use this example here, that one, let's see. Preview, where is my preview? It should be on this list. File, open recent. Yeah. So we'll use this example here as one example. I'll give you two examples. When we get this from a creative team, so what's the topic here? The topic here is understanding our digital asset requirements. So from a business analysis point of view. So creative mocks up the site. And so here we're seeing these are the size images they want to use for this component. These are the size images they want to use here. This is the size video they want with a thumbnail. These are the other video thumbnails that they want. And then they can potentially give us something different for tablet, and they can give us something different for mobile. So what this does then is creates a requirements problem. And when we get into the requirements problem space, we literally have to determine, I'm using this, go full page. So we'll ultimately get into a name, and I actually have a slide deck here. So I want to share with you a way of expressing. I thought I had it open. I apologize. All right. So what will happen is your creative team will develop these templates. And inside the template, they will come up with a language, which is your component language. So inside your component language, you will actually start to get digital asset requirements. And if you haven't been through this before, you actually think this is painfully boring, and this is like not really that relevant, like do people really do this? And what you find after you launch a website is, yes, you actually live and die at this level of detail. So this is a template. The template is composed of components, and you'll see that for engaging experiences, components have to have rich, beautiful content. And so now you actually have to keep track of how many pixels wide and high those things are. And what you're going to find out is that if the designer hasn't been informed by an architect, they're going to have very random aspect ratios. And what you would tell them is, by the way, designer, if you can reduce your aspect ratios, so it's okay to have let's say you do a 9:6. You can have a 9:6 that's a small 9:6 or a large 9:6, but as long as it's 9:6, you can simplify a problem. You might still have a page weight issue, because you might want a 9:6 that has a smaller page weight. So you could change the rendition, but it's very common in the case of Aetna. This site, which was designed by people at Digitas who did not worry about aspect ratios, they have about 26 different aspect ratios in their images. And we'll talk about why that matters. Okay, so anyway, so in the requirements, you're going to come up with what are the sizes of things that you need. So ultimately, what you will do is you will literally, the business analyst will actually come up with a name of a component and what the size requirements are. Now, when you look at this one column full bleed background component, which is heavily used on the site because it's a really nice background image that has copy on it, but you'll see it's got 3 different sizes to it. And those different sizes even have different aspect ratios. So these are just inbound requirements that you're going to say is, okay, if we're going to bring this site to life, then I have to take my images and I have to be able to support the image sizes that are needed by the component, by the desktop, tablet, and mobile. Question?
So you're saying AEM comes out with this template and provides you this out of the box?
No, what happens, so what happens is the creative team is going to comp out the site.
Right, I mean, there, I get that.
And so then the development team has to do stories, user stories, and has to make estimates to how they're going to build each of these components. Inside the user story is the acceptance criteria that says this is the rendition size needed for this viewport, mobile, desktop, and tablet. Now, the other interesting problem that you're going to take into account, and this is a workflow problem for the business, is they're going to say, okay, I'm going to make this 4-person family image. And you're going to say, now, do you only want to use that 4-person family image for homepage 4-column component? Or do you want to use your images across the site? Like, do you want to use potentially this image as a sidebar component? Do you want to use it as a hero component that's a full bleed? So you'll ask the question, in my view, I tend to want the business to just upload one master image. I'll do something like, we're going to load up 1280 by 1024 high res, or we don't even do 1600. Typically the heroes, the wide heroes, you might be an exception. So typically your basic rectangle is going to be the one that you need. But the way I have a point of view that says, in order to simplify the business, they upload one master image. And so that means they're going to upload one master image, 1280 by 1024. And when they see that image, they can drag it on any component they want. And that component knows what rendition to use. So if it's a teaser sidebar, and it's supposed to be a little square, but they grab that thing and they grab it on a teaser sidebar, it's going to show up as a little square. Because one of the problems that happen in development sprints is that people drag images onto components, and then the UAT group says, it's not right, it's squeezed. Like, it's, you know, like you took a rectangle and you made it into a square, so people start to look like this. You know, or it's stretched out again and it's like, oh, the circles aren't, because people weren't keeping. So you're either, if you haven't done this 3 times, what you do is the creative team hands to the production team, and they slice 6 versions of this image. And then they have to make a folder structure that says, this image is the 4-column version of the image. This image is the hero version of the image. This image is the teaser sidebar version of the image. And then someone says, you know, there's a thing called a DAM. And there's a thing called an update asset workflow in the DAM. And there's a workflow step that says create renditions. And the DAM actually creates all the renditions for you.
Sorry, guys, I got to help. Thank you so much for your
All right.
time. I'll definitely be back for the next
And
one.
we'll share the slide deck.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. So some of the things I'm telling you about problems that you don't know yet, which is a kind of a funny thing. So I've been doing this for years, and I explain to people problems that they don't know, but after they have experienced it, they say, oh, that really makes a lot of sense. So what we're talking about is then taking in requirements for your images before your DAM gets loaded up with 10,000 images that are copies, 5 different copies of each image. And therefore you have to have a folder structure and a naming convention around doing it. Put in one master image in your renditions, and I'll show you how renditions work. Renditions fit underneath the master image. You don't even know the renditions are there, but the components know the renditions are there. And we can talk about that.
Do you have a question?
Just a quick question. Yeah,
Sure.
when you talk about master image, I was just curious if it could be could it reference like a Photoshop file?
Yeah, sure.
Could it be that?
Yeah.
And then that way, if something changes, if something needs to happen with a Photoshop file, then the designer updates it there and it cascades through or triggers the renditions again.
Yep. So we'll talk about that when I get into the DAM workflow. So
Okay,
we're going to get into the guts of this question.
So the question about rendition and aspect ratios, the traditional question designer asks themselves with this website, or is a new type of question because of the different breakpoints?
Yeah. So it's kind of designers who have been through this and who are thinking about it. So the challenge we have is, how do you industrialize a design? And so there is a separate engineering practice of design for production. So someone makes a prototype, and then someone says, okay, you made a prototype, it cost you $1 million to make your prototype. Now, you actually want this production version to cost $150. So how am I going to take your $1 million prototype, which should be like, how do I take your amazing JavaScript, your amazing prototype website, and industrialize it so marketing team can just drag stuff on it and build 10,000 pages? So we're going to...
Question was around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that help understand or getting closer to understand what does industrializing mean. So if someone with, a creative
let me give you an example. So I'm going to give you an example with Aetna. So Aetna is an example of the creative team did not know about the industrialization problem. So let's look at this image right here. This image is actually a rendition. So one of the things that's a trademark of my work is everything, all images that will serve from my websites will come from the rendition folder. Nothing actually comes from the master folder. It always comes from the rendition folder. So if you look at this image, there is a 300 by 216 version of that image. Now watch what happens when it goes here. And this is a common responsive issue, right? What's interesting is in mobile, it's common for the rendition to be larger because it went from 4 column to 1 column. It's like counterintuitive because you say, well, the mobile image is supposed to be smaller than the desktop. Not always. So now the rendition is the 767 by 350. That's a totally different aspect ratio. So what happened was, in the case of the Aetna industrialization problem, is we really had more renditions than were optimal. We said, do we really need to have those very slight variations of rectangles? Couldn't you have stuck with a specific rectangle? We can still deal with it. But to take into account for each rendition, it's an extra step in the DAM workflow, which is not that big of a deal. But it's also an extra step in the component that the component needs to understand all of these different rendition types. And I'll show you what that means. AEM right now does not support, when you drag an image, when you take an out-of-the-box image component and you drag an image on it, it doesn't use the rendition folder. It uses the master image. It uses the original. So one of the things I'm sharing with you is that you actually have to, and I've shared that I'm actually on the Customer Advisory Board. So I'm on Adobe's Customer Advisory Board for Assets. So when you use the out-of-the-box image component, it's going to refer to the master image. And the pattern that I'm suggesting here is that you should define the rendition required for each component, and when the component renders itself in the viewport, the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript work together to produce the correct rendition for that viewport. There's potentially 4 renditions. So it has to say, oh, here's the viewport I am. So you do a media query, plus you do some HTML and JavaScript, because if you just use media queries, you're actually going to download all the image renditions. So you actually have to use a JavaScript jQuery kind of event in order to pull the right one. And I know I'm getting into a little bit into the weeds. I don't want to get too crazy here. I'm going to show you why this matters.
So how the different size of images, did AEM created it for you, or like?
We'll talk. I'll show you this.
Because my question was like, if the original image was with some aspect ratio, how did it change the aspect ratio?
We'll show you that in the demo.
Yeah, I'll show you that. But notice that designers are commonly giving us these kinds of things. See, look at this image here. So the other thing is, if you could influence the designer, you could say, please reduce your aspect ratios. Lots of times we get this after the client has signed off on it, right? The designer did it, the creative team did it, these are the comps, these are got signed off, right? So look at this, look at the aspect ratio. So this aspect ratio is different than this aspect ratio, which is different than this aspect ratio.
More than aspect ratio, what you'll notice here is that this hand is cutting off.
Exactly.
And so it's not really an aspect ratio. What they want to do is they want to show different parts of the image. And recently, there's some new HTML tags that came up, right? Which is image sets. Right? You can talk about image sets.
I'm not going to, but that's one way to solve the problem. But this is the other piece of the problem, is that, and if you do research on this in responsive, this is called the art director problem. So what happens is the art director is inclined that when you let's use Etna.com as the example. The art director is inclined to crop differently depending on the size of the image. So let's look at this one here. I didn't preview this, but let's see what the crop is on those two people. See the crop? It's closer. So it's not what we think of. Well, we're just going to throw an adaptive image component at it. I'm sorry, but it doesn't work, because the art director, actually, with a top-notch team, the art director wants a different crop at a different aspect ratio, because it makes for a more engaging content. They're trying to say, on this device, in this way, I want to bring the focus to the hand. I want to bring the focus to the eye. Sometimes they cut off heads. It's like what you cut off. If you go to Bloomberg, you'll see that on one thing, you're seeing news people go in line to the Brexit poll and a large image. And then when you bring that down to mobile, they cut off the heads to say these are people going to the exit poll. But the art director did a different crop. And it's a normal problem for world-class experiences. And we can support this with AEM. And I'll show you how in more detail. But mainly what I'm helping you just to get into your head is that the creative team is likely going to throw multiple renditions at you. And you have two choices. You can actually say, I need a separate asset for each rendition. And you say, that's the creative problem. You're going to throw 10 creatives at it, and you're going to create 10,000 images that are really 1,000 images times 10, because they have to be different sizes and different aspect ratios. Now you have a naming convention problem. It's like, oh, and then we got to go find the image. Just think of an author. Now the author has to say, well, am I finding the 3-column version of the image? I got to find, Jeff's head. But depending on the component I'm dragging Jeff's head into, I got to find the 3-column component version of Jeff's head, or I got to find the hero, the mobile hero component of Jeff's head, or I got to find the desktop hero of Jeff's head. So one of the things from a business analysis point of view is you say, dudes, do not start slicing and dicing multiple versions of the same image. Give it to me as an inbound requirement, and I'm going to make AEM do it.
Right now, we get the image and we say from our director in Seattle, for example, and then somebody in Florida will get the same image and they want us to focus on different parts of the image. Right now, we would say we would get multiple copies of that image after 1,000 emails, and after the email chain to the designer and then to the front-end dev team, the correct image would then be different even on each tablet, mobile, and depending to each community we're trying to do. That's the personalization effect that we're focusing on.
So I'll show you the pattern. I won't say that I can solve all problems, but I can show you the pattern and how AEM can support many ways to solve this problem. And so this is mainly what I'm establishing a need state right now. People don't realize that they need to understand image renditions. I'm showing you that you probably do need to understand image renditions unless you're running a Rauxa website that uses squares. Because if you use squares, then you have no problem.
We actually use image sets.
Very good. I'm just teasing.
Image sets, by the way, I was teeing that up. Are you guys familiar with image sets? So recently, now all the latest browsers have the ability to determine your browser size, right, and the device that you have. And to solve the problem of art directors wanting different versions of the image, not different sizes of the image, but actually different images based on the device, use image sets. So for every particular content type, you have 3 different images that you put in there, physical different images. And you can do that with image sets. So when you're on your mobile device, you might get a completely different picture than when you're on a tablet versus desktop. And image sets allow you to do that.
Does that cover gradient?
Anything, because you're physically changing the actual link to that image, right? So you could say, with this tablet, I might have an image of a boy versus an image of a girl. You know, you can program it to do whatever you want it to do.
And I'll show you the pattern that's available in AEM, which may also be able to leverage image sets, but there's a pattern. Mainly what I'm trying to share for you is that AEM is an industrialization platform that if you know how it works, you're going to solve significant problems that could cost tens of thousands of man hours. And you just say, oh, now you do have to solve the problem up front. You have to solve it by establishing your requirements. So the way you solve this problem is you establish the requirements that, oh, I have to systematically document every single component, and I have to systematically document the rendition requirements for each component. But if you do that, then you can let the platform solve for that. And then I'll show you what we mean.
6.2 or 6.1?
This is standard in what we're talking about.
But it is.
Your life is a little bit different because you have Scene 7.
But still, if Scene 7 will do dynamic renditions, but ultimately I do think from a brand management point of view, this is still the pattern that I would use because it's all about the director's, the creative director's cut. So this is still applicable to Scene 7. We would still use the DAM, and then we would post-process the images into Scene 7 from the DAM rendition processing. But some of these it would be a detail. So we'll get back to the presentation. Mainly, I'm establishing that there's a need state for understanding what your rendition requirements are. So correct, and so it's going to apply exactly to video as well. And it can apply a bit to documents as well. So ultimately, this is in a different project. So a different project, we've had to develop, 40 or so image components, and these were the aspect ratios required. Now, in this case, unlike Aetna, we reduced the number of aspect ratios because we informed it, but we still have aspect ratios. Lots of times we were 16:9, but you could see this got away from us and it was 16:9:5. But ultimately we're saying, let's establish rendition requirements systematically because it's going to benefit the business. It's going to benefit the creative team later because your production team is going to cut multiple versions of the same image. or they will do it only when they need to. And it'll benefit your authors because the authors will just find one image. They'll say, show me the image of the kid with the rainbow. And it says, oh, kid with rainbow, there's the image. Oh, there's only one. There's not 6, depending on where you're going to place it. There's just one. But when you drag it, it will know which rendition to use. It will know the shape of itself in order to paint that in there. So we're going to talk about then how the DAM works as a factory. So we've established our creative design. We've established our rendition requirements. And now we're going to apply it to the DAM. So the DAM is a factory. And it's actually a very complex factory. And it's a factory that, depending on how many assets you're going to place into it, it's going to chug along. So how many people have put in, 10,000 assets into the DAM? Anybody here? Or thousands? Okay. If you were to do that into just a base instance of AEM, you're going to lock that system up for a couple of days. Now, if you're doing InDesign files or you're doing Photoshop files, you're going to lock that system up for weeks. So one of the things to realize is this is a factory, but a factory has to be managed. It means you need enough CPU, you need enough memory, you may need enough instances. So sometimes you'll schedule things to work at night, or sometimes you'll say, business, I know you only bought 1 license or 2 licenses of AEM, but if the amount of workload that you have to manage all of your digital assets, it has this much CPU and memory requirements, so we're going to need more licenses or we have to load images on weekends or something like that. That there is literally just a cost of processing images and video and documents, and we'll talk about that. So the DAM is a factory. So the first thing to know about the DAM is that there are things called launchers, and launchers are basically observers. So the cool thing about the JCR, which is the brilliant thing about these day guys, who really are just brilliant engineers before they even got today, is they design things in such an elegant way. So the JCR is built based on a URL structure, and then it has an observer pattern on top of it. So the DAM can act completely differently than sites. Assets can act completely different from sites because of this observer pattern. So the launcher is the observer pattern. The launcher is observing what asset or what file got placed in what URL. And depending on what file got placed into what URL, it will then launch a workflow that's appropriate to that. We'll talk about why that matters. And then it has workflow. So when you put, even out of the box, when you just double click the jar that you downloaded from Adobe, and then you upload any image into the DAM, into any folder in the DAM, it's going to run a workflow. And it's going to create 3 renditions automatically. And the renditions that it's going to create are the ones it needs for you to use the product. So it's already creating renditions. The product is rendition aware. The components that they're giving you out of the box are not rendition aware. And that's a lack in the product. And I've told that as a customer advisory board member, that they should make their components rendition aware, because that's what the DAM is for. And so that's being put into the roadmap. So there's workflow that we're going to talk about, and workflow creates renditions, but renditions live in the DAM. Renditions come with the DAM. It's just people don't know about them. So this is the goal of this conversation. So inside our workflow, we're going to talk about metadata extraction. And metadata extraction is relevant primarily for photos. So photos, Adobe actually was great about the EXIF standard. So Adobe has helped all the camera makers build metadata into their photos. And remember, because that is such a wide, there are so many freelancers and there's so many photo agencies out there, there's additional metadata that a photographer can place into the photo. So when you use Lightroom and when you use other things. So professional photos have tons of information in them, in the metadata. And the DAM understands it perfectly. So it takes the metadata that's in the photo. So if you're working for Reuters or you're working for, some news outlet, any media outlet, the camera is telling the location of where the photo is. It's telling the settings of the photo. It's telling the author of who the photographer was. It's telling what camera it was. But it can also add additional information that the Bureau may require them to have. The DAM knows how to extract that. The DAM also knows how to put that metadata back. If the business, if Bloomberg consumes a photo and Bloomberg wants to add additional tags to the photo, the metadata that they placed into it will be placed back into the photo. And the reason it's relevant is because as that photo moves around, then it has metadata inside it so that people can find the photo, people can manage the photo, people can do digital rights management, people can do expiration management, nothing like that. So metadata extraction is an important part of DAM workflow. And then renditions are an important part. We'll talk about that. Image renditions, video renditions, document renditions. And then there's post-processing. Caching is an important part of digital assets, right? Because digital assets are going to take up terabytes of data. So what are you going to do after it's in the DAM? First of all, you might even want to do the workload somewhere else. So there's a way to move workload around in the DAM and distribute workload across different instances of AEM. And then post-processing, you might want to upload it. You might want to move it to YouTube. You might want to move it to a content delivery network like Akamai or CloudFront. Or you might want to move it to just a folder structure that you keep on your NAS or something like that. So there's post-processing and workflow. So we'll talk about that. So inside of this basic product capabilities, you'll actually run into certain problems. So if we just use the out-of-the-box DAM in our first project, the first thing we would find out is that the image component doesn't know about renditions. So we have to work around the image component's lack of rendition awareness. We need to realize that adaptive images, it's kind of cool, it sounds cool, that you can drag an image on the page and you drag the image into the adaptive image component, and then you make a servlet, and the servlet will then squeeze the image together, but you'll find out that the development team is now controlling the digital asset. And how many brands want developers to be controlling the quality of their digital asset? That's not, I don't recommend it. It's sometimes you get away with it, but it's not a recommended approach. The brand typically wants to control the asset, and particularly as you were talking about for Verizon, it wants to talk about the particular size and the place. And so I would recommend not having developers control image assets. And then dispatcher, how are we going to manage dispatcher? Because dispatcher is our first level of cache, and there are special problems with dispatcher folders because the master image lives in this URL. The renditions live underneath the master image. So your master image is going to be /content /Etna /content /DAM /Etna /individuals and families /health /image name. But the renditions live beneath that with a /JCR /renditions /something else. The reason I'm telling you this is you'll get this weird server error. And the server error says, I can't write images to the rendition component because there's a folder blocking me. Because you can't have both a master image and a rendition subfolder in the same URL. So I'm describing a problem. So you'll see, wow, dispatcher's not caching my renditions. Dispatcher's trying to write to the JCR folder underneath the image, but the image is there. So you have this JPEG file that's supposed to have a /JCR /renditions here. You can't have both the master image and the rendition in your dispatcher at the same time. So all of your components have to either be rendition aware or not, because they don't go together. So that means if you use the out-of-the-box image component, anytime you use the out-of-the-box image component, it's going to break your rendition aware component. So you have to go all or nothing. Sure.
So based on your signature, you use all your images under the rendition. You never use master.
I never use master. So all of my components, and so what I have to do is this meeting, it takes me 2 months in a project to educate everybody in the project that none of our images on our production websites are going to come from the master image. They're all going to come from the rendition folder. And everyone say, like, what does that mean? Like, how do we do that? Well, we do that by exactly what I'm explaining to you here. So video, we'll talk about video renditions and video profiles. And we'll talk about the HTML5 player, because once you go to the HTML5 player, you don't have this downgrading thing anymore. So how do you serve both a high-res video and a mobile video if they're both done with the H.264 video codec, right? Everything's H.264 now. So you're going to have two flavors of video renditions, but the mobile device, HTML5, will say, great, I'll play the first video that I can play. So out of the box video component is not rendition aware for HTML5. We'll talk about that.
Are you currently using the video component out of the box in CQ, or?
What we do is we extend it. So similar to the image components, we extend it so that when you drag an image into the component, well, no, when it actually, I shouldn't say when you drag the image into the component, we extend it so that the way when the viewport renders something, the viewport says, oh, I'm a mobile viewport, so pick the mobile profile. So what we do is we hide. So what happens is in video, you will get 2 or 3 videos in a row in your video player. And the video player is supposed to play the first one that it can render. Mm-hmm. The problem is if you put your high-res video and then your low-res video, the mobile device can play the high-res video because it's an HTML5 H.264 codec, which now the HTML5 player plays it. So you have your large video that got downloaded for a mobile device. So it's a problem that's not intuitive until you actually realize that once you go to HTML5 and H.264, then you have to extend the video component to say, if I'm a mobile device, I need to do a media query to pull my mobile video profile and not my desktop video profile. And I'll show you how that works. And you also have to deal with dispatcher caching, because the other thing about HTML5 video is that when you get an HTML5 video on your browser, it starts to stream. So you don't get an HTTP 200. You get an HTTP 206. And when you get an HTTP 206, the dispatcher doesn't know how to cache. So you'll find out that my videos don't cache. So you have to work around the problem and tell the dispatcher to cache, to always cache. So I'll tell you how we work around that. The DAM also supports making sub-assets. So when you drop a Word document or a PowerPoint file or a PDF into the DAM, it actually pagifies those things. It does page-based rendition. So that means you can do page previews on your device. So someone can drop a Word document or a PowerPoint document into the DAM, and you can have a component, and you can actually do a page preview right on your device. And it'll be served right from the DAM, right from your dispatcher. So it's really, the power that's in the DAM is amazing. And so as I said, what we need to do is when we get to InDesign files and we get to Photoshop files in particular, there is a workload that's put onto the bench. So it's an enormous amount of CPU. And there are, companies who are using thousands and thousands of InDesign files and Photoshop files, and they need to do the correct scale sizing of how many AEM instances they need to do that processing. So in your case, you likely need a dozen AEM instances or something. So there is a sizing process, and Adobe documents it somewhat reasonably, but and there's also a job offloading architecture that you can leverage. But one of the first best practices I will mention here is the first thing you should do is disable. The very first thing you should do on your project is disable the default update asset workflow step, because you need your own custom update asset workflow step. Because if you just use the out-of-the-box one, the out-of-the-box one is going to generate all of these crazy renditions, and you might not need them. So videos, for example, is going to create 3 huge video renditions. And you probably don't want those renditions. It's going to create all of these different documents, sub-assets. And that's an enormous CPU and disk space issue. And you probably don't want those either. So the first best practice is disable that and customize it according to your needs. So now let's go through some examples. So we'll go through examples of how the dam works. So I will go to an instance of the dam. And we will try to keep that. So here is AEM. And inside of AEM, there is tools, there's workflow, and then there's also, I'll use the old-fashioned version of the dam. So we know that there's a sites tab, and then we know there's the dam. So here is the folder structure for the dam, and as we know, we can just place things inside of it. So I'm trying to.
Just a quick question. So
Sure.
is this the full dam? Like, is this the full license to AEM
Yeah.
Assets?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
So, I mean, that's, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing without that, right? Is that,
Well,
because they do have
so
a core dam.
yeah, there is. I still haven't figured out the nuances in 6. They're trying to separate out sites and assets. And I haven't figured out exactly how that licensing works, because I think pretty much most people are buying assets and not sites. So
We did the exact opposite. Like at PwC, we have the license for AEM sites, which includes a core dam, but then, you know, they're trying to sell us on AEM assets, and we're not sure like, if it's necessary.
it's kind of a new SKU. What they're doing is they're trying to create more revenue opportunity. They are investing in it, but I don't really totally understand the difference between what do you get in sites that you don't get. So because so far with 5.6, you've got sites and assets together. And all of my clients in 6, and I have clients in 6.0, I have clients in 6.1, and I have clients in 6.2. They all have sites and assets. So that's a question that even I have, that if you don't buy assets, what don't you get? So let's use this as an example. So here we have an example. So what we know is in the dam is an easy way to place digital assets. So images, videos, and documents. So let's look at what this really means though. So inside of this, it has metadata. Now, all we know so far, the metadata that was in this was that it came from Photoshop and it has a width and a height. If it came from a camera, or if you downloaded this from an image service, it would have other information as well. So whatever metadata is in the image will automatically get populated here. And then there's additional tags. So you can tag it. Tagging is going to help searchers findability. So you'll want to develop metadata for that. I actually have a presentation on metadata, but I don't want to go there yet because we're kind of in the details here. But now notice, here's the renditions. Now, out of the box, you'll get 3 default renditions. CQ5 dams, 3 renditions, because the product wants to use these 3 renditions. But if you're going to program additional renditions, then these are the renditions that we've programmed in, and I'll show you these, how we did that. So inside, so let me show you, the dam supports renditions. So let's actually go to Content, Dam, and Channel U, and let's see, Content, Dam, Channel U, Communications, News Articles, December. Content, Dam, Channel U, Communications, News Articles, December. Now notice this. So notice that we see this Rachel Welch, But notice there's a plus sign. All right? So inside there, we see, here's where the metadata is, and this is the XMP data, but here's the rendition folder. Now, out of the box, it comes with 3. So we've added additional ones. So here's the rendition folder. So here's actually the, you know, the 370 by 219 rendition. Now, look at what that URL looks like. And I know we're getting kind of a little bit into the weeds here, but this is ultimately where your developers live. So all of your defects, all of your UAT, all of your acceptance criteria is going to get into this level of detail. So I have this Rachel Welch JPEG. And so if you use the default image component, the default image component is going to place the file Rachel Welch 970.jpg in the file system. Now, if you have another component that's rendition aware, the rendition aware component wants to use the JCR colon. Now, we're on a Mac, so on a Linux file system, I can use a colon. But if I'm on a Windows file system, I have to have a rewrite rule that converts colons to underscores. So if I have Windows web servers, then I have to convert colons to underscores. But you can see now, it's going to see that this rendition 370 by 219 lives underneath the Rachel Welch 970 JPEG file. So the dispatcher cannot have both the master image and the rendition on there because it will block the file name. So I know this is a detail. You'll just remember it sometimes when you see in the weblog, like, why are my images caching? Why is it throwing this error? Oh, because I can't have both the master image and the rendition at the same time. So notice then that the purpose of this is to say that the DAM is built in. Most people don't know it until you get deep into a project. It's there to give you renditions in the DAM. So it wants to know what your rendition requirements are. And then if you give it the rendition requirements, then it means that when you go to a responsive website, then you can display these images in the different size. So let's look at how we actually implement this. So I'm going to use this card here. This well, actually, while I use this one, I'll use a different. I'll use a news story, news and communications, and section page, company news. Okay. So here we have, this is using the renditions 236 by 140. So notice that if we go to the DAM itself, when someone drops an image into the DAM, in my DAM, they're actually going to be programmed for building all of these different flavors of renditions. And so when there's only going to be one version of Rachel Welch, and the DAM workflow has been programmed to make all of these size squares, all of these different rectangles. And so now we come to the creative team, and the creative team says, you know what? I don't want that aspect ratio, or I don't want that crop for that aspect ratio. When I'm using, so let's use a different image so that we can find something that makes sense here. So we'll find an, that's not the most beautiful image there. Okay, so notice here the different kinds of cuts that are taking place. So when we get to a creative team that wants to have a different crop, which means that, hey, I know that these two people can get placed in here, but they could actually say creatively for their mobile experience, when you have mobile, they could say that I really want the focus to be on this device. So they could actually make a crop that actually cuts off the heads and they put it here. In the DAM, you can do that because all you have to do is delete the rendition. So you select the rendition, you delete it, and then you upload a new rendition. So instead of the dynamic adaptive image component making renditions on the fly, the creative team can look at the brand and can say, these are the approved renditions for the viewport size. And so they can still make their director cuts, but they make their director cuts and they place it in the DAM as a rendition size. And then the component knows that, oh, for that rendition size, I use this one instead. So this, I think, connects back to the image sets, because if you place your image sets here, then the component will load the assets from here for the image set, and your viewport will know that it's doing it. Now, let's remind ourselves why we're getting into such excruciating detail about renditions. So if we go back to Aetna.com, we'll recall that here we have this square, but when we go responsive, that square goes to this rectangle. And we remember that international, look at international. International goes to that, or this carousel, this is a hero carousel. So the hero carousel is going from this. So here's a person, here's a bike, right, and the steps. But when you stretch it out, it's now going to something different, right? So but the DAM does all that for you. So instead of you having to have 5 different images with different names, you just say, please tell me what the requirements are. Don't place the images into the DAM until I know what your requirements are, until I know that I can program the DAM. So let's talk about how do you actually program the DAM. All right, so let's look at the workflow. So we'll go back here. We'll go to models. And so here is the DAM update assets. So this is the workflow that you should disable, by the way. But we'll select it, and then we'll edit it. So out of the box, you're going to get a workflow, and the workflow knows that it's going to create cut sub-assets. It's going to do metadata processing. It's going to, here is my rendition step. So I've added additional step for channel U image renditions, and let's look at this process step here. No. It's not letting me edit it. So let's see what we're doing here. All right, there we go. So this is an additional process step that we put in, and notice that these are the rendition requirements we needed. Oh, we can't extend it. This control is a little weird. But we didn't do this because we wanted to. We did this because the creative team's comps were such that we have all of these renditions that are required. So that way you can drop in one image and the DAM will create all these other renditions for you. Now there's other processing rules for renditions. There's a detail about how you're going to crop. So if you're going to, if you're given a square image and you need to make a rectangle, you need to have some business rules about how you do it. And if you need to have a rectangle and you need to make a square, you need to have some business rules about it. So there's certain things about cropping, and there's certain things about math. So I won't go into it in detail, but there is basically what you want to do is you typically want to resize first, and then you want to crop the leftovers. So there's a principle on how you do it. So you don't want to stretch an image. You want to do it in a certain way. But I'm not going to go into the detail about how you create renditions. Some of it you would find out by doing. In addition then to the image renditions, there's FFmpeg renditions. So FFmpeg is a video codec that creates videos. It also will create thumbnails. So if you drop a video in the DAM, then the video will process it, and I'll show you about the video processing steps. And then if you
how does it know to create a thumbnail for a video based on which frame? If your initial frame is blank,
it will default. But what you can do is it's also a rendition. So videos also have rendition, so that you can replace it.
That you can replace it, but automatically if you want to create one, and if your first few frames are blank or something that you don't want to have it,
So it's,
how would it create, right? It will create the first few frames, right?
well, this is something, so you can give it index steps. So you can do a count. So I don't know the inputs to this component, but it's a design problem. You will try to develop a common standard pattern, but then you want to do in your workflow for approval, you'll want someone to approve your
Right.
thumbnail renditions, and they can always replace the thumbnail rendition. Yeah. But the one point that's very important here about so thumbnails are interesting too, because thumbnails, you likely want to have JPEGs for, and other assets you want PNGs for. So you want to manage your PNGs and your JPEGs in order to optimize your page weight. But the FFmpeg is where the transcoder is. So this is also identifying which video profiles you're going to be using, and we're going to talk about video profiles. So you can place a video in the DAM, and if you just use the default out of the box, it's going to create 3 humongous renditions that you probably aren't going to use and you don't know about. So if you turn that feature off until you know what video renditions you really do need, then you create video profiles, and I'll show you how to create video profiles, and then you place those video profiles here, and then this is the video that are created. So what you can also tell a team if you do have a project that has video, you would tell a team to just use some sort of standard. Don't have them over-engineer the transcoding, because you can say, we're going to automate the transcoding in the DAM. So just give us a standard process here, and then in the DAM we'll say what our bit rate's going to be, what our frame rate's going to be, what our rendition size is going to be, and which codec we're going to use. You can do it all in the DAM. And so that way, sometimes teams over-engineer things, because you're ultimately got to create renditions anyways. So they're not creating the renditions, you're creating the renditions, and so you want to have the business rules here. And then documents, similarly. So we create documents. So let's see what that actually looks like then. So I can make this thing go away. So let's find a video. So here's a video, and here's an 88 meg video. And so you'll notice that out of the box, it does provide you the CQ5 thumbnails, basic ones, but then we've added some other thumbnails, and we've added, here's ours, we're using JPEGs, and then here is our video renditions. And so you can control which video renditions you want, and then when we go to the actual website itself, let's actually see how these video renditions work. So here is, let's reload the page. So let's just to show how we got here. So if we go to this mega menu here, I'm hitting a cloud. No, I'm hitting Time Warner. All right, Time Warner. Your site's running a little slow here. Could be my Wi-Fi. Okay, we'll load the home page. I'll go to the 2 video pages. All right, and then I'll pick a video. I wonder what's going on. This was just working. Huh. All right, so we can see how that's fairly straightforward. That looked, pretty routine. So let's now make it smaller. And all right, so looks pretty simple. You know, two different. You know, was it two different videos? Was it the same video? Let's find out. So let's inspect the element. So when we look at the video itself, we actually see that there's a thumbnail. That's a rendition thumbnail, and then there is a video itself. Where is my video in here? Let's go to network. And let's go to media. And let's refresh. All right, here we go. So notice that I'm picking up this IEHQ MOB. So that's the mobile video. And notice the 206s that I'm getting. I'm not getting a 200. And so what's interesting about, I don't know, how many people are HTML5 video folks? Is this like really, I apologize if this seems like we're really deep into the weeds, but if you have video on your site, these are some of the details that you're going to worry about. So what's interesting about HTML5 video player is when you, and it's actually wonderful, is it's very easy now to serve video on your website. You don't need Akamai and you don't need YouTube to serve video anymore. You can probably do, depending on what size server you have, you can probably do 400 video streams simultaneously on any average web server without Akamai, without YouTube, without Brightcove. And why is that? Because the HTML5 video player and the H.264 codec allows videos to start streaming and they play while they're streaming. You're not downloading the video. So that's right out of the box with the HTML5 player. So the reason I'm saying this, I'm not trying to get too detailed, but the 206 response code that you're getting means streaming has started. So the video, what you'll watch is if you look at your web cache, you'll actually see that your MP4 file is growing. This is a 90 meg file. It's only downloading 1 meg and it starts to play. So the detail is if you can get those videos to your web server, they're going to play very quickly. The problem is they won't cache because the dispatcher only caches something that has a 200. So if you have a 206, it says, oh, I won't cache that thing because I didn't get a 200 message. So you have to write your own observer pattern to make sure that when the dispatcher asks for a video and that the dispatcher actually gets a copy of the video written to the file. But mainly what I was talking about is notice this is the HQ mobile video. Let's make it larger now. And let's reload the page. And let's see what video we get. So notice now that we get the desktop video. Now this does not work out of the box with the Adobe Video component.
It's humbling.
So what you would normally do is you would follow the instructions from the Adobe website and you would learn how to make video profiles. You would experiment with getting the right video profiles and you would develop 2 or 3 video profiles. And then you would configure the video component and you'd go into design mode and you'd say, these are the video profiles to use in my video component. And then you'd say, great, I have my desktop, I have my tablet, and I have my mobile videos. Awesome, like, look at me, I solved this complex problem. What happens is the QA team will say, you know, I hit your web page and I played the video and I got the desktop version of the video. I didn't get the mobile version. And you'll say, why? And you'll find out that because the HTML5 video player and the H.264 codec allows the HTML5 player to play the first video that it finds. And the first video that it found was the desktop. So you have to write a piece of code similar to the image rendition component that says viewport, when you're a mobile viewport, don't ask for the desktop rendition, ask for the mobile rendition. So that's a detail, and I've reported it to Adobe. But the beauty of this is if you have a team, you say, I don't know, should we buy Brightcove or should we do CDN? How do we play video? You can actually just play video regularly now. Now you'll scale it up. Like you might not be able to do more than 400 streams simultaneously per server. So if you have 4 web servers, the beauty about AEM, right, is you only pay for the AEM licenses. You don't pay for the web server licenses, right? So you can put 16 web servers in front of 2 AEM instances. And now you have 16 caches. And you can play 400 to 1,000 video streams per web server. So you can support 16,000 video streams on your own web servers. And web servers are cheap. So video is actually pretty amazing now with HTML5 and these codecs and this. And so as you get into video, realize that you can do your proof of concept and you can show people, and then you can solve it more if you need to, but you don't necessarily need to go to Scene 7 yet. You don't necessarily need to go to Brightcove unless you're having unless you're Netflix, you know what I mean? If you're having 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people stream your videos, then you should say, how much infrastructure do we need and what's our CDN solution, for that. So then we talk about what these components look like. So we've explained the problem that we need to be rendition aware. We've explained that in the case of video rendition. So let's look at, we talked about image renditions. I will try to wind this up here. But let's talk about video profiles, and very briefly, I'll just get to talk about video profiles. So if I go to Tools, if I go to Assets, if I go to Processing Profiles, where are my processing profiles? I think I have to go to Classic View. If I go to Classic View and I go to Tools and I go to DAM.
Classic View is the best thing. All the time.
Yeah.
I used to hate that color.
Yeah. So here's where the video profiles are. So what you do is out of the box, they're going to give you all these ones which you're not going to use. And ultimately, then we created the desktop and the mobile one. So
if I'm saying that the video translation thing, does it come with AEM now?
you have to install it.
You have installed it, right?
Yeah.
Still you have installed it.
Yeah, you still have
Why
to.
they cannot just put it in the...
I don't know. But I agree with you on that. So anyways, here's what a video profile looks like. So you actually can create the extension that you want, you create the MIND type, you create all this stuff. And the important thing is bit rate, frame rate, and output size. That'll control the size of it. And once you create the video profile, that just means the profile is ready to use by FFmpeg. But you create the video profile, you have to then go to your DAM, and you have to put that profile here. You have to install FFmpeg. And then when you drop a video in here, then your profile is going to get created here. So this is the, and so we made a mobile version, IEHkey mobile. So this is the mobile version of the video, which means it's a slightly different bit rate and slightly different size. And if we do the desktop version of it, so here is where's the desktop version? Here's the desktop version. So you can see that's bigger, right? So it's just a bigger video because one's for mobile, one's for desktop, which is that. So we talked about image renditions, we talked about video renditions. Document renditions also are part of the DAM. And so if we find a document.
Question, for these examples, your videos are in AEM, right?
Yes, the videos are all in AEM. So I create first I document what are my requirements. So usually the business is going to say, like, these are our requirements for video. Lots of times, like for you in Mexico, I'm sure they're going to have thousands of videos. So you're going to say, what are your processing profiles that you want? And you can show them how you can optimize. And then you'll set up the processing profiles. You'll set up a workflow that they will put the videos into certain folders. You'll probably have metadata workflow around it on how you want metadata for findability, but you'll have your video profiles, and your workflow then will produce the video. You'll produce your thumbnails, and you'll likely will have an approval workflow process step, but you're likely going to need post-processing steps that you're going to add because you're probably going to move those videos somewhere else. You're probably not going to let them sit in your AEM repository. You're probably going to move them somewhere. And you may move them into a CDN, and in your case as well. But at least that's a post-processing step that you can build into the component. But similarly, there's documents. So I just want to show that in the case of documents, if we find a document, then documents also have sub-assets. And these sub-assets are actually pages of the document. So you're literally, when you put in a 30-page Word document or a 20-page PowerPoint document or PDF, the DAM actually pagifies it. And so then you can, if you have a user experience that requires it, someone could look at a document, they could do a preview. And that way they could view the thing on their phone without having to have Word installed or some other experience. Because even when you download a PDF, it's not that good on your phone. It'd be much nicer if you could just do a preview. So this is all supported in the DAM. So mainly, if we rewind, we say, if we establish our requirements, we can confirm the design, we can program the DAM workflow steps, and then we can adjust the components to be rendition aware. So that's basically the process.
Would you recommend with PDFs to start with the source file, like InDesign? So that way, and then the renditions would just be the PDF.
That's a good way. Everything has a cost. So you'd say, from a workflow point of view, would it be a good workflow? Potentially. Then you'd say, from a CPU processing point of view, do you want to use your AEM servers for that CPU? And now they will host InDesign servers, so the DAM will work with an InDesign server. So they could upload a file. The file will get dispatched to an InDesign server. The InDesign server will do the renditions, and those renditions can then be brought back to the DAM. So there's multiple ways that Adobe will help solve that problem. So the DAM is InDesign aware.
And you could ingest any type of document files, right?
Well, so there's a web page that says what document types are supported, but I at least Word, InDesign, Photoshop, PowerPoint, PDFs, those are all supported. So just to close, all of the things that I'm telling you, in a sense, should be part of your playbook. So since I showed you a demo, we actually have a playbook that we run, because anytime you've done something 3 times, you have kind of the lessons learned. So we have a discovery and planning process step. We have an experience development process step. We have a QA and transition process step. And we have a performance measurement process step. And that's what we bring to all of our engagement. So it's not obvious, because people just want to get the site up as fast as possible, and they want to throw some pages in as fast as possible. And that's great to get you started. But if you haven't worked out all of your digital asset requirements and your digital asset design process and your digital asset findability and authorability process, you're going to launch a site. But when you actually have to bring new images and new videos to it, you're going to have to either have a lot of manual steps, or you're going to have a new project to say, okay, now let's do it right the second time instead of right the first time, which means you'll have to program the DAM and have to replace your components to be rendition aware. So my proposal for your thinking is, try to, in your design step, say, folks, in the project, we need to encapsulate our rendition requirements and make our components rendition aware. It'll take a little longer up front, but it will work in the future, so that way you just upload one video or one image and the renditions are taken care of by themselves. So it's a little bit of a user education process, which is why I've gone to all of this trouble to describe it to you.
I have a good question about rendering. Does it provide any additional type of tool like highlighting, text to top type of functionality tools?
So I think that would be on the presentation layer, right? So what you have a digital asset, and the digital asset has the format, and then you have a rendition of that digital asset, and then you have a client that's consuming the rendition. So if you wanted to highlight something like a PDF, you would serve the, you know what I mean, it would be part of your presentation. So PDFs do support highlighting, but if you wanted to highlight, then you'd have to figure that out in the rendition step, or you'd have to figure out that I can't serve the preview of the PDF, I actually have to serve a PDF for highlighting. So, and then you'd need to highlight on the client. So some of these you'd have to decompose the solution a little bit. I have not done, typically I think this is why, the Adobe Creative Cloud is so useful as well, that we kind of delegate the Creative Cloud, and people should get Acrobat Pro if they want to edit PDFs and do highlighting or do commenting or do something on it. But the DAM itself for authors does do highlighting, and it does do annotations. So in the DAM for your authoring, people can do things like that. But the visitor who's getting the asset on this doesn't do it yet. So that was my presentation. How do we do on time? It's almost 9 o'clock, so it was over an hour. Apologize for that. But we'll give you the slide deck. You can see we didn't get into code. There is a lot of code behind it, but lots of times people can, once they know what the problem is, they can talk about what is the code behind it. So mainly I demonstrated what the problem that you're trying to solve more than the code that supports it.
Thanks so much. Let's go.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Did you give us the slide?
Yes, this is a PDF deck, so I can, I'll give it to Amit. And yeah, great.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm very glad I got to hear your presentation. I mean, you told me about it. I was really excited to see what you're going to. There's a lot of little secrets in there, a lot of stuff to consider as well.
Yeah, and sometimes we can't implement it all right away if our